Hello everybody, Chris here, and in this video I want to show you guys a quick introduction to LibreOffice Calc, which is essentially a free alternative to tools like Microsoft Office Excel, a spreadsheet app which allows you to add in a bunch of numbers into different rows and columns and run functions against them in order to calculate things like sums, averages, or other useful statistical information. So because of the nature of organizing things in this column and rows based list, it can also be used for things like budgeting quite easily. It can also be used for things like creating a list quite easily, especially if that list is going to have multiple columns of information, such as a date, maybe a description, a person's name, and so on and so forth. So inside of a calc document, what we're normally going to want to do is to have one column be responsible for a specific type of information. So for instance, in this column B, that's everything where it says B down, rows are left to right. We can go to the top cell of that column. That's where a row and a cell meets. So here we're talking about cell B1, and we could write a title for that column. So I might call it the date column. And let's say that this information we're trying to do is a summary of money spent, which could be for budgeting. So I'm going to say spent here, which is going to be a dollar amount. You don't have to add a dollar sign there. That's just for my own reference. And we might say over here person if it's a family budget. And then maybe in column A, we have the purpose of that expenditure. So this is going to end up becoming a table where we have the purpose of whatever money was spent, the date it was spent on, the amount of money spent, and who it was spent by. Now, all four of these cells, A1, B1, C1, and D1, are going to be titles or descriptions about everything that goes below. So what I like to do with those is to make them bold or underline them, just make it somehow different so that it's very clear where the title is and where the data is. So if I want to take these and make them bold, I can hold down Shift, left click on A1, and then left click on D1, and that will grab all of the cells between A1 and D1 in a selection. You can see that selection being made up here. It is possible to manually type them in as well. And I'm going to hit Control B, which will use bold on the titles. So you can see here the bold icon popped up. So it's up to you if you want to use hotkeys or if you want to use the icons that are available to you up here at the top. So now we could start filling in some data. So let's say for A2, the purpose of our first expenditure was to buy groceries. So that seems like a pretty clear purpose. So I will hit Tab to move over to B2, which is the next cell. Whenever you hit Tab, it moves one cell over, always to the right. And for the date, I guess I'll put it in today's date. So I will make it 11/19/2018, and we will say that we spent $50.54, and the person was Chris. Now I'm going to hold Control and middle mouse wheel in order to zoom in by scrolling up on this table information. And you can see here that there is a little red arrow going to the right on this cell A2. The reason for that is that we typed in buy groceries, but there's only enough space in order to read buy grocery. So if we want everything in this column to actually show properly, what we can do is we can double click on the in-between border between A and B up here at the top. So I'm going to do that, and when I double click it, it'll automatically make enough space so that everything in this column going down A is going to be readable. So if you ever run out of space, just remember to double click on the column area, like you just saw there on accident. It will also shrink it if there's extra space. So that'll just automatically adjust it to where LibreOffice Calc thinks the best position is. So now for the second item, I will put something in. So let's just say buy shoes, and we'll put the date as 11/18/18. So that would actually be the previous day. Now you might note that normally when you're organizing things, you would do the earliest date first, not the latest date. We'll get to that in a second. So I'm going to say these shoes were $40 exact, and the person was also me. Now, you might also notice another thing that just happened here. When I put 40 and the dollar sign, it immediately cut off the .0.0. So first, let's talk about how to sort all of this data by the date And then let's talk about how to make sure that there will always be trailing decimal points for the money spent column, basically formatting the currencies. So now in order to sort by date, I'm going to left click on the B column and we go up to the data menu. And we want to do sort ascending, which means it's going to take the earliest date and put that at the top and descend to the most up-to-date date, or in other words, the current date. So I'm going to use sort ascending here. And when we do that with only the B column selected, it'll notify you that there's extra data in the adjacent columns. So A, C, and D. It realizes that all of that is supposed to automatically go together. So it's saying, do you want to sort all of these columns at once? And we do. So I'm going to hit extend selection so that all of this data is being treated as one row. So extend selection. And then when we do that, it sorts by the date, but it also adjusts all the other columns too. So buy shoes moves up, the $40 for that purchase moves up, and the person, well, moves up as well, but you can't tell because it's the same information. Another way you can do it is to select all of the data, such as left clicking and holding, basically dragging a box around all of this data, going up to data, sort, and you can choose a sort key here. So in this case, we would want, let's say, sorting by the money spent, and let's say descending here. So that should mean that the 50 moves up to the top because the 50 is the biggest number. So it's descending from the biggest number to the smallest number. And we hit OK. You can also add in extra sort keys if there is ever a tiebreaker, but usually unnecessary. So we'll just sort by spending here, hit OK. And you can see now the data has been reorganized again, but it already realizes what data we're supposed to use because we selected all of it at once. And I'll go up to data sort one more time, and let's do the date ascending and get that back to how we originally wanted it. So perfect. Hopefully you get the idea of sorting there. Now let's format this column. So we want to format the C column, the money spent, and we'll do it with 2 trailing decimal points for dollar amounts that may have 0 cents or 40 cents would still cut off 1 decimal point currently, I think. So the easiest way we can do this is to go over to where it says add decimal place and hit that twice. When we do that, it'll make sure that there's always at least 2 decimal places with our money amount, no matter how many decimal places we add in. So if I was to do something like, so now if there is a 3rd trailing decimal place, that would be cut off. So if I do 40.001, that should cut off the 0.1. And I believe if we do 40.009, it will round up to 40.01. You can also click on the whole column, right click and do format cells, which will give you extra possibilities for that column. So for instance, if I wanted to format it as a currency, I can click currency over here. For me, USD from the USA is selected by default, but obviously you can choose other currencies as well. We can choose the format we want it to show up in. So since this is standard US dollars as a currency, we can select this option, which you can see has 2 trailing decimal places, hit OK, and that'll be essentially exactly the same as before, except that now it adds the $sign in front of it. So playing around with those formatting tools, you can get information in a column to show up how you want it to, even if you don't type it exactly the same way. So let me show you another quick example. I will put 55 here, and that's it. And then I will hit enter, and what's going to happen is it's going to add the $sign and the trailing decimal places. So that'll keep your data consistent, and you don't have to type in unnecessary information like the $sign, the decimal place, or the 2 zeros every time you type in information. So let's add in a couple extra rows of data here. So I am going to say bills, and we paid that on, let's say, the 14th. Or you know what, just to change things up, let's change the year and the month. So 2/14 year 2017, and the person is going to be Rebecca. And let's add another one in here. So we'll say vacation trip here, and let's put in something ridiculous like $99.99.99, and the amount of money we spent on it was $2,530, and the person was Chris/Rebecca. Now note that the name here is overflowing into the other column again. We don't want that, so what we can do is double click between the D and E columns, and that will expand the column automatically so that the data fits better. Now we want to organize this again. So all of this data, and we will go up to data, sort, and let's sort by the date again. Ascending date, hit OK, and that organizes it. And now you can see that the numbers are going up as the list progresses, which is what we want. We should probably format this column as well. So I'm going to select this data and right click it and do format cells. So we want to format this as a date. So I'm choosing category date, and we can see that you can do 2 numbers for the year. You can also choose other options if you prefer text, such as having the month be listed as the word of the month rather than the number. But I will leave it here as month, day, year. Hit OK. Okay, so that didn't really change anything there. I imagine that LibreOffice Calc already realized this was supposed to be a date column and made it that automatically, but not certain there. But what we might want to do is make sure all of this text is aligned properly. So if you have some weird issues where these numbers are aligning left, but these are aligning right, we can select the column or just the data we want by holding Shift down, left clicking on your first cell, and then left clicking on your last cell. And we can align those to the right. So I'm going to do align right over here. And that just makes sure all of this data is consistent. So in a nutshell, that's the basic idea of how you set up tables and organize your data inside of LibreOffice Calc. Let's show a couple functions. So first, I'm going to take the entire row between A8 and D8, and I'm going to add a border to the top of it so that we know that everything under here is supposed to be finalized numbers or a sum. So I'll right click, do format cells, and let's go over to the borders tab. And I'm going to add a border to the top by left clicking over here at the top line, making sure that the left side does not have a border. And then we want to increase the width of this line, make it a little bit more visible. We'll try hitting OK here and see how that turns out. So that added a black border line at the top of the A row between cells A8, B8, C8, and D8. And now I want to take a summary of everything from C2 to C7 and add that together here for the total in C8. So if I go over here to this little sum button, there's a function wizard if you wanted to try a more complicated function, but the sum button will make aggregating or adding numbers really simple. So I'll click that, and what you'll notice is that it automatically realizes, oh, you probably want to add together the numbers above it. And the C1 cell is clearly a title, not part of the data. So it's showing you which cells are going to be added together. You can come in here and change the starting point if you want to make it like C1 for some reason. If you really want to include that, that will give you an error. I will do C2 here, and we'll just do the except here because it already has exactly what we want. We want to add everything from C2 to C7, and we'll hit accept. So you can see it automatically figured out all of this gets added together to be $2,675.54. Now, to prove that it's automatically calculating that, I will add in a 6th number. So let's just make it 555.32, hit tab, and you can see the number immediately gets updated. So when a cell has a function in it, it automatically calculates based on whatever numbers are found in its data set. And the data set here is the input from C2 to C7. And let's make sure we don't accidentally change that. So hitting OK. And using those kind of functions, it becomes really easy to get a lot of work done that will dynamically change inside of LibreOffice Calc. Okay, so let's do another example of a function you might use, and we'll use the function wizard in order to do it. So rather than a simple sum, let's look for a count now. Now, there are a lot of functions in here, and many of them are going to be overwhelming at first, and you probably will never need to use 90% of them. So don't worry about it too much, just learn them as you need them. So for instance, you can just find the functions you need. You can use the internet as a reference if you aren't sure exactly what that function might be called. But here we can do a count of all of the data in the D column and figure out how many instances there are of something. So we'll use count here. You can see the description will appear over here on the right, and the base count says how many numbers are in a list of arguments. But if we go over to count A, then it'll say how many values are in a list of arguments. So we want values because we're not counting numbers in this column. So I'm going to double click on count A, and now we need to put what values we're counting. So we're going to add in the D column. So from D2 to D7. So we do that by putting in the double dot colon in between the first cell and the last cell, which means D2 colon D7 is a range, and you can see that range appearing up here with the blue lines. So the result of this is going to initially be 4, so I'll hit OK. But if we start adding in a new value over here, I'll just call it 5th value, and I hit tab, then you can see it immediately updates. So it's properly counting how many values are put inside of this range, not counting blank spaces like this one down here below, or if I delete the value in here, it goes back to 4. Okay, let's cover one more thing in this introductory video, which is going to be how to make a chart out of your data. So when you have data, it might be nice to have it in something like a pie chart so that it's visibly presentable, or something you can actually print out and use in a presentation. So to add a chart in, I'm going to click down here on a new cell and go up to Insert and then Chart. So with Chart, we're going to be able to choose from different chart types, such as columns. Those are bars that go up and down. Bar charts, which are left and right, and then pie charts, which are more like percentages of a pie. For instance, we can use our data to show what percentage of the total money spent in all the transactions does each transaction represent. So I will choose that and I will hit next. So in the next section, we're going to want to choose the data range. So I'm going to hit select data range up here. Okay, so in order to add in a pie chart, what we should do is select all of our data that we're going to be making into a chart here. So I'll just select everything from A1 to D7, and we'll do insert chart. And what you'll notice is that it'll pop up here to the side. Initially, it's going to be a column chart, which is not what we want, but you can see columns are obviously going up and down for each of the values. It doesn't really make a lot of sense there. Bar charts are going to be going left and right, and then pie charts are going to be percentages of a total purchase. So we're going to hit next here. We already have our data range selected because we did that before we hit insert chart. So we could hit next. By the looks of it, it's actually including the 6 and 7 rows. So I'm going to cut those off right here by changing this D7 to D5, and we'll hit next. And you can see that updating over here in the pie chart. And for data series, we're going to want to actually remove things like the date and the person, because that's not part of our chart. The only data we actually care about here is dollars spent. So you can see that is already updating here and the data is looking proper. But currently it's a bit bland. Like, we can see the percentages based on visuals, but we can't see any numbers associated with that. We can't see the original $ or the percentage. So we probably want to add those in as well. So we're going to want to fix that. I think for right now we want to hit next, and maybe we give this a title. So we can say percent of money spent, and we could say here between 2017 and 2099, just to give it a little bit more information, and hit finish for that pie chart. So we have the basics set up here. So now if we want some numbers to show up, we can hover over each of these points and you can see that there are numbers associated with them. If we click on this main pie area and we right click and do insert data labels, that's going to take each of our measurements and actually add the labels for that in. Okay, so we might want to change these numbers into percentages now. So if we click on the data labels, and we right click and do format data labels, we can go over to the data labels tab, and then we hit show value as a percentage. And now if we hit OK, it should put the percentage numbers next to the actual values themselves. If we want it to be more clear what these numbers actually represent over here with the legend, we can go back, format data labels again, and we could do show legend key. So by doing that, the colors that are associated over here on the legend are going to show up over here. Another thing we could change is the font of the title and the subtitle. So I will right click on the title, hit format title, and we can go over to the font tab over here and change it to any font installed on our computer. So I'll try some Big Noodle titling and bump the size up. You can see the preview down here, but unfortunately it doesn't automatically update over there until we hit OK. So let's hit OK. One more thing you might notice is that this blue label for the $55 2% bill pay is showing on the inside. So we can customize the position of those data labels by going to Format Labels, and under Data Labels again, you'll see placement is set to best fit. You can change that to outside, inside, or center. So we might want it outside and hit OK. But you can see that with that it becomes very hard to read those individual numbers because basically the pie chart is too small. We could fix that by expanding the size of the chart and then shrinking the size of the pie. So let's drag that in there. And so I don't particularly like that as it is right now, so I will hit Control-Z to undo that change. And we can move the legend around. So let's move the subtitle up a little bit more. And we could make a few extra changes here to make it look a little bit nicer. But we've got the gist of a pie chart added in for our data. Now, what you'll notice is that when we have this chart area selected, that it will show what data is actually being used, once again, with the blue boxes around our data over here on the left. So you can see that data in the 6th row is not actually being included over here. So if I was to add in an extra number here, like 300, and maybe I say bills again, duplicate the date, it might update for this sum function because that included all of the cells from here to here, but not with the chart. So if I want to update the chart again, I'll need to click to go back into the chart edit mode. So in order to update the data ranges, we need to right click on this chart area, go to data ranges, and for data range, let's make sure that it is including the cells A6 and C6 over here. You can see data series is immediately being updated, and we can hit OK. So by doing that, the 5th edition, the new bills, is being added into this chart. So that's pretty much the gist of how you do all of the basic things inside of LibreOffice Calc, from how to add in your data, how to format it, how to do functions like summing and counting, and how to create and modify a chart using the data that you've added in. So hopefully that's a really good introductory video on LibreOffice Calc for you guys. If you ever had any doubt, Microsoft Office Excel is very similar, so once you know one, it's really easy to get the hang of the other. I've been Chris, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in my future video content.